Downtown Alley Pilot Program, Allison Justice and Kerlyne McHenry. Thank you, Kerlyne.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Allison
This
Justice.
doesn't look like 15 minutes.
I promise you we'll do this in 15 minutes. Allison Justice, Senior Project Manager with the Community Redevelopment Agency. I want to, before Kerlyne starts the presentation, I want to give just a brief background of what we're talking about with Public Works and some sanitation initiatives, a pilot project that we're proposing. We have been working with Ecosistema Urbano as part of the Shore to Core initiatives on some above ground improvements in our alleyways. We've been talking about it for several years with the city about cleaning up some of the downtown alleyways. How do we make them more friendly for people to be in, pedestrians, and potentially how do you create a space where maybe these businesses along Clematis Street could have could activate within the alleyway as well. So we're going to talk about this pilot project. Just so you know, on the 300 block of Clematis, under design right now. We're doing some undergrounding with the city's engineering department, utilities. That's under design, as well as with Ecosistema, some above ground design options. So as we started talking about that, obviously we couldn't move forward with above ground improvements to the alleyways without addressing sanitation, and this is going to be a part of it. Just a brief timeline. We're presenting today to mayor and commissioners in the work session. We will be meeting within a couple weeks with property and business owners, and then we will come back to the CRA board with an ask for potential funding approvals. So with that, I'll
Awesome.
have Kerlyne.
Kerlyne is our new assistant. What's your new title?
Operations Manager.
Operations Manager in the Department of Public Works, and has done an awesome job. She's done all of the new routings for the sanitation pickup, and just working on a lot of really good things. Happens to be an industrial engineer, right?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I will try my due diligence and see if I can get through this in 10 minutes. As Allison discussed, we were tasked to develop a high-level proposal for the downtown alley activation. What you're looking at right now is a visual of what our vision is for the downtown alley. The overall scope for the downtown alley are defined by the line segments that you're looking at. And that's defined by the alleyways as well as the sidewalks that are in between Banyan, Datura, and Quadrille Narcissus. It's important to note that we're also including this segment here that is east of Narcissus. I won't go into great detail who the project team was, but during the development of this project proposal, we did reach out to quite a few subject matter experts to ensure that a lot of the constraints were identified and that we had some key team player that could add some value add suggestions. This proposal, I'll talk about two different things. I'll talk about the sidewalk as well as the alleyway. We currently have a multitude of maybe 5 to 6 different receptacle containers today in our sidewalk in our downtown area. One of the things we wanted to do is make sure that we standardized what we have today, and we wanted to ensure that we proposed a receptacle solution that we'll be able to maintain. And so the team developed this proposal, which is a metal outdoor trash can. The capacity of it is somewhere around 36 gallons. We currently have them by the waterway, some of them outside of City Hall, very aesthetically pleasing and very easy to maintain as far as paint.
Kerlyne, we've used the big bellies in lots of places. Are those, you guys don't like those, or they're just too expensive, or what?
Both.
Okay.
And both, and also the long-term solution for big bellies wouldn't work because they're not available for purchase, but more so for lease. And from a capacity perspective and odor perspective and stuff of that nature, it was easier for us to go to something that we can frequently pick up because of the outdoor seating.
Okay.
And maintain. So I want to quickly talk about the tilt trucks. During the construction of the sidewalk, the team expect that we're going to use these tilt trucks to service these receptacles. As you could imagine, the sidewalks will still be open and access for pedestrian traffic, so we want to make sure that from a litter perspective we're maintaining that. And you're probably familiar with seeing these at the mall, laundry facilities, and so we expect to use these during off hours, very less high traffic condensed hours to service these receptacles. During the actual construction of the alleyway itself, we will not, business owners will not have access to the compactors and dumpsters that are in the alleyways. So our recommendation is we use some very high cubic capacity 192-gallon containers, and we want to stage them south side of Clematis. And our ability to service those frequently, no issues there. What we would want to do is stage about 12 of those units, service them 3 times a day, and that would allow us to ensure that we have the capacity itself and collect the right capacity to service these business owners. And during the alleyway construction itself, our expectation is that we're also going to provide valet services. There are some businesses where they're strategically located that may have some constraints, and so we've also added some labor in there to support them with that. And this is just a high-level aerial view of what we're recommending is those 12 high-level gallon containers will just be staged literally in parking spaces on the front end of Clematis during the alleyway construction. Long-term solutions, the team went through quite a few options. One of the options was obviously, what if we keep the downtown alleyways the way that they are? Visually, as you can tell, that there were 5 things. There were 5 critical components that we looked at. We looked at whether or not that solution, the different solutions that we evaluated, we looked at whether or not that met the capacity need for the business owners downtown from an investment perspective, whether from a cost we could fit the budget, lead time, are we able to implement it within the project schedule, are we able to effectively service the customers with those options, and whether it met the overall objective from an aesthetic perspective, cleanliness perspective, as well as sanitation perspective. And so obviously not making any change was obviously not an option. We also evaluated a more robust and more modern solution currently being deployed in Kissimmee, downtown Kissimmee, which was an underground storage container. That was very well adapted by the team. Unfortunately, there were a couple of components that this one lacked. We do have a video to show, but due to timing, we won't show it. There were 2 things, 2 criteria that did not met from an investment perspective. It definitely couldn't do that, and from a lead time perspective, that definitely conflicted with the project.
2 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
right, at minimum. So the team evaluated to pocket that one in the parking lot, and we could reevaluate that as a long-term solution for the downtown area, but that was definitely a no. The third option that the team evaluated was standard enclosure designs. The standard enclosure design would allow us the capability of also adapting a new recyclable program downtown from a sustainability perspective, which gave us a kind of a good plus. And what it allowed us to do is kind of go in and split our trash collection process in the downtown area today. Today we're collecting trash as well as cardboard in one unit, and allows us to work with our sustainable partners to split that. And so during the standard enclosure design for each alleyway that we're considering activation, our recommendation is that we add a large 4 cubic yard dumpster for trash alone, another a large cubic yard dumpster for cardboard specifically, an above ground oil bin container to service our underground, to service our downtown business, and then add bollard to secure these enclosures during heavy traffic way and stuff like that, so that they're not destroyed. The standard enclosure design also met the objective from an aesthetics perspective. I don't have any artistic blood in me, but it created almost a blank canvas for creativity in the downtown alleyways. So that definitely won the team over from a capacity perspective, definitely met the objective, fell within the investment requirements, the lead time, definitely able to implement it within the strict timeline that we have. From a serviceability during activation, it was perfect. It also allows us to increase pickup frequencies as needed, especially with the development and the increases of businesses hours. And our hopes is that we'll see quite a substantial increase. And so that definitely met the overall objective, and so that was a win. So what you're looking on the bottom left-hand side of the screen is actually the 300 blocks south of Clematis. And where these standard design enclosure would go is systematically here, where I'm pointing on the screen, and I'm not seeing the pointer on your screen. It would be here. And so that enclosure design will be kept with, like I said, valet services. We have personnel on the ground that will maintain cleanup frequencies, sanitation, and wash. So that was definitely the recommended solution for the team. From a labor perspective, what would it require? We're talking about different types of services: weed extraction, pressure washing, litter control, touch-up paint where needed, cardboard collection to help the downtown area, as well as, more importantly, monitor and code enforcement. Today we have a few accidents that happen with our below-ground interceptors, grease interceptors, that happen, and if something like that was to happen, that would be a huge concern with the downtown alley activation. And so one of the things that it was very apparent, and our FOG team brought to our attention, is that we definitely want to ensure that while we clean up and haul oil services in the above as well as below ground, is that we effectively use our code enforcement officers to ensure that we do our due diligence to monitor the levels of oil that is being hauled and that they're completely being cleaned out to minimize the accidents happening in the alleyways, especially during the activation hours. And so I'm not going to go into a great level of detail about what this chart means, but it meant that we use engineering labor standards. We use a lot of tribal knowledge in terms of when activation hours were. We've also done quite a bit of instantaneous capacity models by just going in the downtown area, doing some quick observations around weekends, as well as weekday hours, heavy business hours, and stuff of that nature. And we talked about when would be ideal for these services to be conducted, what would be the frequency, and we've also held some our sanitation superintendent actually walked me through the downtown area in great detail and interviewed quite a bit business owners to ensure that we were adding some of their knowledge as well into what would be a great fit from a schedule perspective. And that's how we developed our resource need of about 8 people, which includes 2 code enforcement officers as well as 2 monitors. One of the things that is very important in the success of this proposal is that we have coordinated activity hours. Based on the previous chart that I showed in terms of hours for service that we'll be offering our business owners, is that delivery hours will need to be constrained to about 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning, which will allow all interceptors to be serviced between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. And dumpster trash collections will happen the first 2 as needed for this kickoff, 6 a.m. and 3 p.m. for the downtown area. We currently service 1 time a day. We're going to 2 times a day with the new model. Long-term fund request. We talked about the need of 8 people for all of the line segments we talked about earlier for the entire radius. It looks like from a labor perspective, we'll need somewhere around $377,000. From an equipment perspective, especially as we talk about providing valet service, code enforcement officers, at cleanup crews, we're talking about equipment for about another $131,000. I know we're out of time, but I just want to quickly brush on the fact that we're currently in the way of doing a rate study right now for the downtown area. We've been doing quite a bit of QA. The mayor talked about a route pilot that we've done, and we're currently rerouting our entire fleet, our entire labor asset. One of the key findings during the routing the routing project is that we've identified quite a bit of discrepancies and defects, and what that means is customers highly underpaid, billing accounts, and so we're doing an entire QA right now of our entire customer base for our commercial division. And so what that means is we know there's a huge opportunity from a cost perspective for what the department really should be seeing, especially for our shared dumpster assets. So Scott Kelly has blessed us with the ability and said, go for it. Let's do a rate study. And so I am currently working with contractors to do a rate study for our shared dumpster asset to ensure that we're collecting in our accounts as are where they should be. And so our expectation is that, I know we talked about possible rate increase. We would like to see what the results of those rate studies are before we consider increasing. But it should be a really great gain for the downtown area to say, success story to say, hey, we've cleaned out our accounts and we're also adding these additional benefits to get us to where we need to be. And so that's what we're hoping it should be. From a simulation perspective, what we're talking about is right when we meet with the business owners, we are actually going going to simulate what this proposal is. And one of the great gains that we're expecting from this simulation is that we get their feedback and what worked and what didn't work, so that we can recalibrate and take into account what works for them. And that's really what that simulation is.
Thank you.
So.
My biggest concern is those enclosures. When we've done them in the past, they're like horrible. They're dirty and not well taken care of, and they're eyesores. How can we make sure that doesn't happen if we do this?
So in our proposal, we have a sanitation crew, specifically first and a second shift. And in there, we've included touch-up paint. In there, we've included pressure washing. We've included weed blowers. And I can't go into the details because we're out of time, but a lot of the visuals of what you're looking right now is what those teams' designated core task will be to maintain throughout the day. And we also have a team leader that is going to enforce these things and monitor each alleyways. And they're specifically just for that downtown area.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And so what's the next step here?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So Public Works has come to CRA staff for a short-term and a long-term funding request, and the short-term would be some like Kerlyne was saying, the simulation is how do we get some short-term wins, get some staff out, start cleaning up, start doing some of the pressure cleaning even before the alleyway goes under construction. So there'll be two requests to the CRA board. One would be a short-term funding request, and one will be in the budget cycle for next year for the annual pilot project funding request. The rate study then, so their task with Public Works is tasked with throughout that year is figuring out, how does this maintain through Public Works long term. But obviously, since we're doing the activation, we would like to request the CRA fund the short-term pilot project.
All right, comments, questions for? All right, Commissioner?
So, Mayor, I just agree with you, and I think it sounds like we're going to have the staff dedicated to it. Given, option 2 looked great, but I understand the time and the cost, obviously. So for option 3, for me, and it's been my impression that those things are hard to, if we have specific folks who are managing that and ensuring that that's part of the keeping them clean, et cetera, I think that's going to be the key to it.
Yeah, there's two things. One being Ecosystema was with us when we were looking at these units, and so they're going to be looking at, design-wise, how do you design them that they don't, they don't necessarily look just like a standard enclosure. And the other, obviously, is the maintenance. That's the
keeping them clean. Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you. I just would like to ask if you could do this, once you get your approval for funding, give the same presentation to the DDA. That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, so we'll see you at a CRA meeting asking for money. Kerlyne, thank you so much. I'm sorry you had such a brief time, but Allison, thank you.